Good morning. Today we are going to talk about asset and liquidity management. The bank manager must manage the bank's assets in order to meet liabilities and make maximum return. So the bank manager manage the assets in order to achieve the optimal mix between risk and return. In other words, the bank manager would like to use deposits in order to buy assets. This is to achieve the best balance between liquidity and profitability. So, commercial banks had three main objectives. Number one, seek the highest possible return. Number two, reduce risk. And number three, have adequate liquidity. In order to minimize risk, the bank manager should diversify assets as there is a trade off between risk and return. So the highest return asset has the highest risk, and the same with respect to the lowest. So if you are going to take high return, so you have to face high risk and vice versa. So in order to avoid or to minimize risk, the manager must diversify the assets. Diversification means not to concentrate on one type of asset. The bank manager aims to maximize return and minimize risk. But as we said that there is a trade-off between risk and return. So in order to achieve the highest possible return while minimizing risk, we have to select or make the best balance between liquidity and profitability. Liquidity means liquidity of any asset means how fast and easily this asset could be converted into cash without large cost. What about profitability? Profitability of an asset means the return of these assets. So there is a trade-off between liquidity and the profitability. Say, for example, the highest liquid asset, which is reserves, it's non-profitable. Reserves make no profit. So they don't yield any return. But less liquid assets such as loans, they are profitable. So the main problem of managers is to meet both liquidity and the profitability. Or in other words, to make a balance between risk and return. Let's start with the problem of liquidity management. Suppose that there are three different banks, Bank A, Bank B, and C. The required reserve ratio for each one of them is 10%. And suppose for simplicity that the only balance sheet item found in this balance sheet are reserves, securities, loans, and deposits. So this is the balance sheet for Bank A. Reserves, securities, and loans, and in the liability side, deposits. This is 100, 20, 10, and 70. Case for Bank B. Same deposits, but the difference in terms of asset side. Okay, it's 30, 10, and 60. And finally, with respect to Bank C, as we said that the required reserve ratio is 10%, sorry, is 20%. So the required reserves is calculated as required reserve ratio multiplied by deposits, which is 20% multiplied by 100, which is 20. So with respect to Bank A, there is no excess reserves. So with respect to Bank A, required reserves equals 20, excess reserves equals 0. So there is no excess reserves, there is no any unused money. Okay, while with respect to Bank B, the required reserves are 20. Excess reserves, there is an excess reserves of 10. As the total reserves is 30, 20 of them are required and the rest are excess reserves. With respect to Bank C, So the required reserves is 20, excess reserves are 8. So which one of them has the highest return? Bank A, highest return. As all the money are going to be used and you are going to get revenue from using this money or profit from using this money. While in case of bank B and C, there are excess reserves that can be used in order to buy securities or make loans. Now suppose that there is a withdrawal, deposit outflow or withdrawal of $10. What is going to happen to the three banks? With respect to Bank A, deposits are going to decrease by 10, which is so it will be 90, and reserves will decrease to 10. Bank B, 90 and 20, 90 and 18. The required reserve ratio is as this, 20%. So after withdrawal of $10, the required reserves will be 0.2 multiplied by 90. So it will be $18. Return it back to the three banks. These are the three new balance sheets after the withdrawal. Bank A required reserves after withdrawal is 18, while actually there are 10 excess reserves in the bank. Required reserves in the bank. So there is a liquidity shortage by 8. While with respect to Bank B, the required reserves after withdrawal is 18 and there is excess reserves of 2. So there is no problem here. There is no liquidity shortage problem. Also with respect to Bank C, the required reserves is 18 and excess reserves in this case 0, but also there is no liquidity shortage problem. Only Bank A face the highest, the highest risk. So as Bank A has the highest return, it's also face the highest risk. So as Bank B and C have no problem, so we are not going to talk about them anymore, but we are going to focus mainly on Bank A and how to overcome the problem of liquidity shortage. How can Bank A resolve its liquidity shortage problem? There are three different ways that can be used in order to avoid or overcome this problem. Number one, borrowing from other banks. Bank A has a shortage of $8, so they can borrow from other banks an equivalent amount of the shortage. So there is no change in deposits or securities or loans, but we are going to add 8 in the liability side in the form of borrowing from other banks, and we are going to add 8 to the reserves. It will be 18, which is the required reserves. So this is the first way in order to overcome the problem of liquidity shortage. Number 2, selling securities. In this case, we are going to keep loans and reserve and the deposits constant, while increase the value of reserves by 8 and decrease the value of securities by 8. So the new securities after selling securities will be 10 minus 8, which is 2. And in case of reserves, we are going to add 8 to the amount of reserves, which to be 18, which is the required reserves. As we said, that securities are secondary reserves. So this is the first way that we are going to use if the bank manager would like to solve the problem. So this is the first possible way. Number 3, which is considered to be the last chance or the last method that can be used, which is borrowing from from central bank. Central bank is known as lender of last resort. So we are going to borrow from central bank as a last chance. So this is the balance sheet before modification. Now we are going to add an item in the liability side, which is borrowing from central bank. We are going to borrow 8. This is gonna be added in the asset side in the reserves item. So reserves will be 18. So if you are going to arrange the 3 different methods, so we are going to start with securities, selling securities, then borrowing from other banks, and finally borrowing from central bank. The second important problem or decision that's related to bank manager, which is capital adequacy management. Banks are required by central bank regulations to hold an adequate level of capital. This is not only a requirement enforced by central bank, but it's an important factor for to guarantee the soundness and safety of commercial banks. So bank capital is a caution or protection against insolvency. Insolvency means bankruptcy, or in another words means drop in net worth of the bank. It will be negative net worth. So this is the banks should hold an adequate amount of capital to prevent bank insolvency or bank failure. Which means that banks are unable to meet its obligations. Assets aren't sufficient to pay the bank liabilities. So this means that assets are less than liabilities. So in this case, we said that the bank is insolvent. Or in other words, the net worth is negative. Capital less than zero or negative. When the bank becomes insolvent, insolvent bank occur when there is bad loans, bad debts, written off loans. So let's take an example. Suppose that this is the balance sheet of a bank. Reserves, securities, loans, fixed assets. This is the balance sheet for a bank. Now assume that there are bad loans, written off bad loans of 25% of total loans. Bad loans means that we cannot collect the money back. Bad loans of 25% of loans. So total value of bad loans equal 0.25 multiplied by total loans, which is 160, so it's 40. So the value of loans in the balance sheet is going to decrease by 40 without affecting the liability side, as liabilities are obligations should be paid by the bank. So what's going to cover the bad loans? Actually, this is going to affect the capital side in the balance sheet. So once again, we have to decrease loans by 40. So the new loans will be 120. In the other side, we cannot change any item in the liability side, but we are going to change the capital. So in this case, capital will decrease by 40. Actually, it's 10. So capital will be negative 30. So this is insolvent bank. If it is positive, so there is no problem of solvency. So bank manager should keep an adequate amount of capital. This is by law or by obligation of central bank. This is number one. Number two, in order to meet or to prevent bank insolvency. This is the end of our lecture today. Thank you.